Hi everyone, welcome to today's tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you through all of our gold shade pigments. I wanted to be able to create a little video that's going to be able to help everyone dig a little bit deeper in seeing swatches and all of our different golds, find out a little bit more about the different textures available and what's going to be right for you. So if you can please like, comment and subscribe on the video, and don't forget to see us on Thursday night on our Instagram page where we're going to have a little live party. So I will see everyone soon and I hope you enjoy the tutorial. So for today's look I wanted to try out a new little primer. We're going to be trying out the Be Perfect Prime eyeshadow primer. I'm wanting to really carve my eyebrows out today, so we're going to use PC51 brush, which is this one. This brush is amazing to carve out the brows. It's just a really nice size and shape to be able to build a little bit more coverage underneath the brow bone. And we've got Maurice with us today as well. So what I'm going to do is take the primer onto the brush, and we're actually going to take the product and we're going to apply it slightly underneath where the first hair of the brow starts. Now I want to create a bit of a bigger space today for my eyes, so I am going to be pushing the primer up into the brow. And we're just going to apply the product right the way across. So it's just going to create a lighter space on the lid. So if anyone's never carved their eyebrows out before, there's a couple of reasons why I normally like to do it. One, I feel like it will leave your brow space looking more defined without a lot of product. So anyone who likes a natural look but also likes their brows to be defined, this is a really nice technique to use. And then the other reason is when you're wanting to apply eyeshadows heavily, this will just apply the nicest, thickest base for you. So I'm actually really liking the consistency of this primer. And then what we're going to do is continue to apply this onto the lid. And we're going to do a pattern technique with this. I'm also going over the inner tear duct as well, if you want the whole eye socket to have the primer on. And then with the leftovers on the brush, using still the PC51 brush, I'm going to just take the concealer and just really lightly apply the leftovers underneath. The reason why I do this last is so that there's hardly any product there, but the products later on that we're going to put on, like our pigments, they'll still stick. So you don't want loads of build up of product in this area. So because today's theme is gold, I'm going to be not using pale pigment, which is very rare for me when I'm doing a makeup. We're going to actually replace it with our most wanted pigment, and I'm just going to swatch it for you just to show you exactly what the shade looks like. So it's a little bit more gold, but we've got it with a tone that's really light and natural and fresh. So anyone who's looking for more of a gold toned highlighter, Most Wanted is going to be great for you. And this is what it looks like. So that's it, quite heavy. When I'm going to be applying it today, I'm going to be more blending it right the way out. So remember, with your pigments, the more you blend, the softer they're going to look. So you can see at the bottom is more the effect that I'm going to get with my pigment, but you can see how bright you can build them up. So taking my PC11 brush, I'll just show you what this looks like close up. This is one of my favourite pigment applying brushes. We're going to use PC11. And we're going to apply Most Wanted just to the brow bone and the tear duct. So you can see how it just makes the top of the brow bone pop. You only want a tiny little bit of this. I think too much of it, it just won't look right with the look that we're going to do. So depending on the effect that you want your gold eyeshadow to look, you've got a choice of using a few different brushes when it comes to using pigments on your tear duct. Sometimes I do quite like using my PC11 brush because it will mean that it's easier to blend into the next colour that you're going to use, whereas if you want a more dramatic or defined look, two brushes that I would recommend to use are PC07, which is the round one. It's like a tiny little pencil brush, or you could use PC31. So they're the two smallest brushes that I would use to kind of get the pigment popping in the inside. I'm going to just use PC11 today, and then I might use PC31 over the top of it, but I want the gold to look really, really soft. So when you're doing this, what you need to do is rest the brush right over the tear duct, and then you'll see it'll just brighten up the inside of the eye. So when you're using a bigger brush, just remember it's going to blend as it goes. You just need to make sure that when the pigment's applied to the brush, always apply it to the centre of the brush, just so that when it disperses onto the lid, it's not going to go on and create lines or streaks for you. So you can see we've just highlighted the inside. I will just use a tiny little bit of the Most Wanted pigment on PC31, and that is just going to emphasise actually on the tear duct. I feel like Maurice, you naughty boy. So there's a couple of different ways to apply your pigment to your lid. You can either build all your dark colours around the outside first, and then you can press your pigment on, or you can build the shades up. So you could go lighter with the gold, and then you could put your darker on the outside. Today I'm going to be applying all of my socket colours first, and then we're going to be placing the pigment over the top at the end, and that way you're going to get a little bit more of a pop and it's going to look a little bit brighter. So to start with, today when I'm going to be using my socket colours, I'm actually going to use the Clientele palette from Be Perfect. So this is Jar's palette, who's a lovely makeup artist. I think she's from Australia, I need to check, but I absolutely love all the colours in this. So I'm actually gonna, I'm deciding between Dirty Tan or Peach Out. Both quite appropriate for me, always covered in tan. I think we're going to go with Dirty Tan because we are sticking with golds today. So I'm going to be using PC22 brush, which is our small blending brush. And I'm just going to pick a little bit of the shadow up. And what we're going to do is start building the socket. So when I'm doing this, I'm going to place it just on the outer corner of the eye, and we're going to just blend this out. So when you're using golds on your eyes, again, you can choose to put as much dark in it as possible. I'm going to focus today on more me eyeliner around the lash line being darker rather than the colours in the socket. So you can see when I'm applying the Dirty Tan shade, I'm basically going over the top of the socket, just halfway, and then when there's hardly anything left on the brush, that's when I'm going to just blend the brush out a little bit further. So we're going to take it right the way in. And this colour should meet the start of where you've done your Most Wanted highlighter on the inner corner, and this is going to help you be able to just get a really nice soft blended gold look. So we're going to repeat the step on the other side. And if you've got a big eye shape, this brush might not be best for you. You'd be better to use PC10. But for anyone with smaller eyes, PC22 is the perfect shape brush to fit into the socket. So you'll notice when I'm using the PC22 brush, I'm always concentrating on making sure that the most of the eyeshadow is on the outer corner, and then when there's less on the brush, we're going to take it right the way in. And that way your eye makeup's always going to look a little bit darker on the outer corner, which is the effect that we want. So next what we're going to do is we're going to slightly build a little bit of a darker shade into the socket, and I'm going to do this by using PC34. So the difference between this brush and PC22, it's almost a little bit more like a bullet, if that makes sense. So with 22, the hairs on the ends the more spread out like that, whereas with PC34 the hairs kind of come in, so when you're not wanting to blend the colour out so much, this is going to be the best brush. Alright Maurice, so the next shade that I'm going to use to go with Dirty Tan is shade Brownie, which is this brown. So the two colours we've used is this one and then this one. So when I'm actually picking the product up on this brush, I'm going to do it a little bit differently than what we normally would. I'm actually going to apply it to the very tip of the brush. So we're going to just pick that up, and then what you're going to do is you're going to only apply the product just on the outer half. So it's not going to make a massive difference. We don't want this to be a lot darker in the socket. We just want to intensify it a tiny little bit. So by putting less product on the brush and applying it in a smaller surface area on the skin, that's what's going to create a little bit more depth for you. And you're just going to go backwards and forwards. It's only tiny little motions that you're going to use to do this. So next, using the same palette, we're going to use just black, and what I'm going to do is take our PC12 brush and we're going to line the lash line with the jet black eyeshadow. So with this look that I'm wanting today, we don't want it where we're going to have jet black smoky eyes, we're going to have gold smoky eyes, but something that's really important to do is making sure that you emphasise how dark and thick your lash looks before you apply your lashes. So what I'm going to do is you can lean back and you can almost dig the product into the lash line, and the flatter you can get this, the more natural it's going to look, and it'll intensify your makeup. So what I normally would do is do a couple of little, I almost scratch the surface of the skin, so it's like you're almost shuffling the colour, and then what you want to do is go back over the top and repeat the step. So the darker and thinner you can get this, the better it's going to look. And if you are wanting a flick on the ends of your eyes, you could actually start using this brush to almost tilt the angle of the brush up, and what this will do is create the line where your wing is going to come out a little bit later on. So at this stage of the makeup where you've got your liner on the top lash line, you've got a decision to make whether you want to keep your socket nice and fresh, or at this stage, this is where you can start adding your darker colours going into the socket. So today I'm going to show you how to be able to blend your socket shape back into where you've drawn your lash line, because I feel like this is one of the most important things where people tend to go wrong when they're doing the makeup, or they get confused when they're trying to get it right themselves. So rather than just taking the black eyeshadow at the moment that we've already got on where our little line comes out, what I tend to do is I would use a smaller blending brush. So I'm going to use PC38, and that looks like this, and it's like a smaller version of the 34 that we've just used. And rather than taking the black eyeshadow, I'm going to take a darker brown. So I'm going to take a shade called Too Much from the Jar palette, which is that one. And you're hardly going to see this colour, but we just want it so that it goes from a light brown to a medium brown to a dark brown, rather than it to go light brown to black. And it's just going to create a little bit more of a blended look for you. So on the edge of where you've drawn your little flick, where your line will come out for your liquid liner, you're going to just basically start kicking that colour up, so you can see how small the motion is that I'm actually creating. And what this is going to do is it's going to start giving us our guideline for where our gold is going to sit on the lid. So we're going to keep kicking the colour up, and at this stage, depending on whether you like your eyeshadow looking with like a harsh flicked liner, or you like it really blended out, you can actually take the brush and blend sideways to soften the black this way as well. But all this is choices for your personal preference of how you like wearing your makeup. So I'm softening the black with the brown on the brush, along the lash line, and you can see the way it's going to start creating our smoky effect. And then what I'm going to do is, using another clean brush, which is another PC22, I'm going to just blend out over that. And what you're aiming to get is the depth of the darkest part of the makeup should be on the lash line, and it should blend out in two different directions. So it should go darker to lighter heading in this direction, and it should also do it going over the top of the socket. Oh, we've got Maurice in the background with us as well. Baby! Baby! Oh! Oh! He loves coming and saying hi to everyone. Oh, hello! So we're just going to keep blending that colour out. And if at this stage you feel like you've blended it out too much, or you've put too much black on, there is ways to be able to change it. So if you're feeling like you can't see enough definition, you can always go back with your PC12 brush. Let me just find it. And add that little bit more of a black defined line. So if you're losing your lash line that you liked before because you've blended it out too much, just go over the top. And if you're feeling like you've took your black too far out, go back in with one of your blending brushes that hasn't got any product on, and take your lighter brown. So I'd probably use the Brownie shade, which was the middle one, and then you can just reblend that shade. So if you had too much black on at this point, you'd be softening the black to then put the black on closer to the lash line. So with the looks that I've been quite liking wearing at the moment, I do like me lash line blended out, but then I also like a thinner line over the top that's just a little bit more defined. So it's a case of going backwards and forwards until you're happy with the mix of how much blended and how much defined lines you've got. So I'm just kicking the colour out towards the outside. I always think to bear in mind when you're creating this look, when your lashes go on, all the dark kinda will diffuse out. So don't be worried too much if you have got too many black harsh lines, because it will blend out. So you can see the difference between, if you're going to keep your eyeliner nice and strong, you're going to keep it like that, so we won't blend it out. And then on this side, we've got it where we've blended it out. And then what I'm going to do is just take the socket colour up a little bit more. So you can just keep deepening that shade out. So then any excess that drops underneath, just remember that you can just wipe that away, so you can see you'll get a little bit of black. Whenever I'm working with black, I always have a little bit of excess. And I always just use my finger to blend underneath. So I'm just going to repeat on the other side what we've done. So we're going to start with our medium brown. What we're going to do is blend the lash line out. So you're going to go backwards and forwards. And then you're going to take this colour up into the socket. So a good tip as well when you're doing this at home on yourself is look straight on at yourself in the mirror. I always feel like if people are pulling their eyes around, or you're looking down or up, you're not going to really get the right angle. So what I do is look straight on at myself, and then you'll be able to see exactly where you need to put that colour to then blend it across into the socket. So looking straight on at yourself is a really good tip for anyone who struggles as to where to put the darker colour. And what I'm doing is wait until the colour is completely diffused out, and then what we're going to do is take that colour further along the socket line. So just remember as well, we are actually mapping a shape out at the moment for where our pigment is going to sit, so don't worry about it looking too dark. It's going to look a lot lighter and brighter once the gold shadow is placed over the top. And then remember, if you want to define your darker line a little bit more, go back to your PC12 brush and get that line nice and defined. I always tend to find when I'm doing like a dramatic look, no matter how many times I blend my lash line out, because I want it to look diffused, I'll always go back on and always do a thinner line. And I always tend to have two brushes in my hand, one with no product on and then one with the product on. So you're either putting more of the product on or you're moving the product around, and I use separate brushes to do that. So again, we're going to do a little bit of a wipe underneath the eye, just to take any of the excess away. Remember not to go too close to the eye as well, you don't want to wipe too much off. And then I always use my finger to kind of pat it around so it just softens the colour. So at this stage now, you should be able to see you've got a darker lash line, a colour that's like a medium shade going into the socket. You've got your highlighter on your brow bone and your tear duct, and then we're left with a space on the lid where we're going to put our pigment. So now is the exciting part. I'm going to be showing you how to put all of our different gold eyeshadows onto the lid. So with our range of pigments, they come in different textures, they come in different shades, and I'm going to just show you the swatches of them all and describe the difference between them all. So hopefully it'll help you all be able to choose what shades are going to be right for you at home. So we've already seen the most wanted pigment swatched. So that was the one that I've applied on the tear duct and the brow bone. That was a soft shimmery shade, and that's the lightest gold that we've got as a highlighter in our range. And when we're talking about the different textures of the pigment, I'm going to show you completely different texture, which we've got a shade called Hollywood and Bollywood. This is the amazing packaging for them. And with both of these shades, they're actually called Reflex Shades. So whenever you see me reference a colour and call it a Reflex Shade, what I mean by that is that the pigment is like a glitter, but it doesn't have a powder mixed with it. So it's basically a pure glitter. So these are the two swatches of these shades, and you can see how sparkly they look. So the first one is Hollywood, which is a white shade with a gold reflex, and then Bollywood is the second one, and this is a pure yellow reflex glitter. So these are the type of golds that you would use over the top of after you've put your highlighter on your brow bone, your tear duct, and you can place it over the top of any other pigment to make it look more sparkly. So I'll just show you the two pots of these next to each other, because these are our two gold reflex. So can you see the way Bollywood is obviously looking a lot more yellow in the pot and Hollywood looks white, but when you actually see it as a swatch, they both look gold. So there are two gold reflexes. So within the range of golds, there's a type of texture which hasn't got any reflex or any glitter in. This is nice for people who prefer to just go with more of a shimmer on the lid. It's great for people who wear shimmery eyeshadows for work and they don't want to look like they're wearing too much. So I've swatched two of my favourite golds on my hand here. So the first one we've got is called Gold Fever, which has got like an orangey gold tint to it. And then Wow Pigment is my favourite shade to bronze over the body, and it looks amazing to just dust over the lid if you're going to be wearing, like I normally wear it with just a set of lashes if I'm going out and want to look glam and bronze but not too much. So the Gold Fever pigment comes in the Wild West range, which is, this is the gorgeous packaging for it, and the Wow Pigment comes with the classic Peaches packaging. So Most Wanted, which is the highlighter which we've got on as well, that is the same texture as these two. So we're building up towards the more glittery shades now. We're not quite there with the most sparkly in the range, but what we've got next to show you is two of our pigment shades that are a mixture of powder and the glitter. So you can see these close up. This is Wish Pigment. So it's like Gatsby, which is our bestseller, except for it has got a bit of shimmer mixed into it. And then we've got Chainmail, which it does remind me more of a brownie shade, but I always include it when I'm talking about golds because it reminds me of like a fool's gold shade, and it can be passed as a gold. So anyone who likes a brownie gold that's shimmery with a little bit of a sparkle or a twinkle to it, this shade's going to be great for you. I'll just show you these two shades up close in the pots as well, because I do think you can't see on the swatches exactly what they look like. So this one is called Wish, and then this one is called Chainmail. And Chainmail was one of the pigments from our 90s collection, which comes in this gorgeous packaging. This is one of my favourites. When Kate was designing it, she said it reminded her of Miami Beach, which at the time, I think I wasn't there at the time, but I just love Miami. So to me, I just absolutely loved it, and I love the little peach logo on the top as well. So in the pigment range that we've brought out, we wanted to be able to basically bring a range of pigments out that were the best quality, that were the cheapest that you could get, and basically the strongest raw materials. So when we've brought out Gatsby, which is our best selling pigment, you can see when you look close up at the shade of the gold that it is, it's just the most sparkliest colour. I'll need to show you it in the pot, I think, so that you can actually see. I don't know whether I'm going to have to create a separate one. So you can see as I turn in the light how these three shades, it doesn't even show you justice how sparkly they are on this video, but anyone who has bought any of these shades will know they are the sparkliest pigments around. So we've got Gatsby, which is our best seller, and that's like a pure white gold. Then we've got our famous pigment, so anyone who prefers more of a warmer orangey toned gold. And then we also brought out our Dynamite Pigment, which is more of a coppery gold. So depending on your skin tone and your complexion, you might prefer one of these shades. So the thing that I love about the pigments is that you can mix them as well. So if you have the essential ones in your kit, you can swap and mix them to suit clients' outfits, or if you're doing your own makeup, you might just want a mixture of a couple of them. So another swatch that I just wanted to include with our golds, which is actually a pink eyeshadow, but I just feel like it's relevant to show you this with our golds, is our She's All That pigment. It's a pink shade of pigment that reflects as gold. So anyone who might want a gold lid but they are wearing pink, this would still look amazing. And I just thought I'd include it in my gold video because all the gold lovers do tend to love She's All That shade. So you can see She's All That, it's a really light baby pink with a bright gold reflect. So all the gold fans do tend to normally like She's All That, so I thought it'd be nice to include it in our gold video. It's one of my favourite shades. So when it comes to applying a pigment to your eye, it can be really hard to decide which brush to use and which primer to use, and whether you should just apply the pigment straight onto the lid or whether you need to use a separate primer to what we've already done. So the answer to that question is there is a massive variety, but hopefully with this video I'll be able to help you with a little bit more guidance as to the different options that you've got. So really, if I wanted to at this point, I could just take my PC11 brush. So anyone that would be in a rush or doesn't like the pigment looking too sparkly on their lid, you could literally pick the pigment up with this, and with the primer that you've already got on from the first bit that we've done, you could literally just start pressing the pigment on. That being said, it would last all day, but a lot of the people who like to wear like these Instagram looks and a little bit more dramatic, there's different primers that you can use to be able to create different effects, and you can make your pigments look a different effect as well. So we've got our glitter base primer, which looks like this, and the aim behind the glitter base primer is it's going to act as a tacky base to be able to let the pigment press on and reflect the most sparkly that you're going to get. So what we'd normally do is we'd apply this onto the lid, you'd leave it to set for a few seconds, and then what you'd do is place the pigment over the top. But I think the thing that people get confused with is, what brush do we use with this? Do we use the same brush that I've used with this to then apply the pigment? And what I would normally say is I would use a separate brush. So if I was going to apply my glitter base primer, I'd either use a flat brush like the likes of PC53, which is the angled one, or PC51, like what we carved the eyebrows out with. You can use any size brush like that, and what that's going to do is going to create a really harsh cut the crease effect. So you can cut the crease using the glitter base primer. That being said, I do prefer to actually apply it with a softer brush, and that way what I tend to find is I prefer using the pigments on me personally to create more of a effect where the pigment would be brighter and more sparkly in the centre, and then it would disperse around the outside so you wouldn't have any harsh edges. So if you are going to do that, different brushes in the range that would be great to do this with are PC20 and PC11. So they're the two brushes that I would use to apply the glitter base primer if you're wanting a soft look, and then the brushes that I would then apply the pigment over the top with are something along the lines of PC35 or PC23 if you've got a big eye shape. So the fluffier the brush is that you're going to apply it, the softer and more blurred out the pigment's going to look. But if you're wanting your pigments to look really, really sparkly, your carving brushes are going to be best. But definitely use a different brush to apply the primer than the actual pigment. What tends to happen if you use the same brush that's got the primer and the pigment on, as soon as you pick the pigment up, that's got the glue on it, the pigment's already stuck to the primer on the brush in the effect that you want it to. Then when you go to press the pigment onto the lid, it just kind of doesn't give the same bounce back and sparkle, if that makes sense. There's a lot of pigments and primers and words to be used, but that is the facts of how to get your pigment popping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my primer with PC53 brush, and then I'm going to apply the pigment on the inner corner with the PC20 brush, and then potentially on the outer corner I'll use either PC11 or PC35. So you basically want a nice soft fluffy one to apply it with. So when using the primer, the idea behind how much to use is quite important as well. So with your primer, you only want to apply this where the glitter is going to stick. So anywhere that this is going to go, the pigment is going to pop. So I'm going to pick a little bit of the primer up with my PC53 brush. I'm going to work it into the hand, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the primer just in the part where we want the primer to sit. So I'm taking the PC53 brush, which I really enjoy using, because when you're applying the primer to the corner of the eye, I feel like the shape of it with the angle lets you get close into the lid. So I think a lot of people, when they're doing their lid, where to apply their primer, they get a little bit scared looking at the crease, but use your crease as your guideline. So you can see as I'm moving around, you can see that is exactly where I want to be applying the primer. And then I'm going to take a little bit more of the primer, I'm going to press it onto the lid. Now normally what happens when I start applying the primer to the lid, I turn the brush around and I start pointing the brush into the angle so that we can get the pigment right the way on the outside. And a little tip for when you're doing this and you want your pigments to blend into your socket shape is take a fluffy brush, so this is PC35, and start patting the primer along just above the lash line and into the darker colour where you've done your socket. So what this does is it starts blending the primer out before you start applying the actual pigment. Then what I'm going to do is we're actually going to use Dynamite Pigment today for our look. We had a request from Millie last week on the YouTube video saying she would love to know where to apply Dynamite. So we're going to use Dynamite Pigment, and what we're going to do is take PC20 brush, and before we apply the pigment to the actual eye, we're going to pat it into the hand first. And what this will do, it'll take away any extra bits that we're going to kind of drop everywhere, and then you're going to lean back and just place the pigment over the top of where you've put the primer. Now if you want this to be neat, you can place it right the way over the top, and if you don't mind a few little speckles of the pigment not looking as bright but maybe sitting slightly above the line that you've drawn your primer, that's fine too. It's all about how to get it blended out. What I tend to do is take a separate brush, like a small one like PC33, and I'll then blend the pigment over the top just so that it looks nice. And then what we're going to do is continue to apply the pigment towards the outer corner. And normally what I would do is change to a bigger brush on the outside corner, so I'll use PC11. And then we're going to continue to apply the Dynamite Pigment just over the lid. So when you get to the outer corner, it can be really hard to know where to stop applying the pigment. So what I would suggest to do is apply it just slightly below where you've put the primer, And then when there's nothing left on the brush, then you can just kind of pat over the top of it, and any excess will blend up into it. So it will leave you looking like you've got your pigment right the way across the lid. Something that's really important when you are applying your pigment is not to over press the pigment. I think people think that by packing more and more on, it's going to make it look more shimmery, but the aim of to get the most sparkly pigment effect on the lid is to basically really softly press the pigment onto the lid the first time round, and you don't want to jam pack the pigment too much onto the lid. The whole idea is to make the pigment look like it's only slightly sitting over the top of the primer. So the more you jam pack it in, you're going to get more of the effect that it looks like a foil. So anyone who's wanting to go for more of a sparkly effect, the more light-handed you can be with your pigments, the nicer they're going to look. I think it's also important to know where about to start applying the primer as well. So I haven't applied the primer anywhere on the inside of the tear duct. I'm applying it straight to where the lid would start, and I'm not putting any pressure on the primer where the black lash line is, because we want that to still look smoky and dark. So the primer is being lightly pressed onto the lid. And then I'm going to go back to my PC35 brush to just put it on with a slightly more blended effect on the outer corner. And that way you've got the definition on the inner corner, and then it's going to blend out easily on the outer corner. So again, remember with your pigment, the lighter handed you can be with it, the more sparkly it's going to look. You're basically just dropping the pigment down to sit and stick over the top of the glue. And then taking the PC11 brush, we're just going to use the bigger brush on the outer corner. And then what I tend to do, let me just check, maybe put a tiny bit more on there. So a little tip for once you've actually applied your pigments is go back in with your PC12 brush. I always find no matter how neat you've put your pigments on, you'll always get a little bit of drop down onto the lash line. So we just want to reinforce the depth in that line, making sure it's nice and dark. Oh, been outside, have you? So if at this stage you're looking at your makeup and it hasn't gone to plan of how this tutorial has gone, there's a couple of things that quite often happen to customers when we're teaching them in store, that I just wanted to go over to show you that might be able to help you. So the first thing is if your pigment is too high onto your lid, so you might have applied your primer a little bit too high, or you might have just applied the pigment, you can just take a clean brush with a tiny little bit of your eyeshadow and just basically blend back in your socket line. So you definitely want to make sure that your pigment is just on the lid and it's not on the lash line. There's not really a lot you can do if you have applied too much primer or too much product, but just remember that you can come back and watch this video, and practice makes perfect. So the more times that you go over this and get the consistencies right of how much primer and how much pressure you need when you're using your brushes, the better you're going to be at doing your smoky eyes. So other things that might go wrong when you're doing your smoky eyes is that your pigment just might look like it's inconsistent on the lid. So the first thing you need to check if you've done this is, did you apply your primer evenly over the surface area before you've applied your pigment? Because your pigments will always show up differently if it's on bare skin or if it's on primer. So you need to make sure you get it right the way across your lid. So when applying the pigments, if you're looking at it and you're thinking, why does mine not look as bright on my lid as what NYX does? One of the questions we always ask is, how long have you waited before you've applied your pigment over the top of the primer? Even though the glitter-based primer, it's amazing, like it does give you about a minute to be able to work with it, you do need to bear in mind that the product will set. So make sure that you've got your pigment ready to apply before you put your primer on, so that everything's ready and you've got a bit more time to just pat the pigment in. And then the other problem might be is that you just haven't put enough primer on. So it might not be that you've left it for too long, but if you haven't put enough of the product on, the glitter is going to stick as if nothing's underneath. So just make sure you've got a pea-size amount. Something about that much should work well for you. So the next step of the makeup is optional depending on how you want your smoky eye to look. I'm going to be applying a liquid liner just to kind of clean the line off from where the pigment starts to end. And if you prefer more of a smudgy, smoky look, you might prefer to leave this out, or a more natural look, but I really like how this effect looks. And then what we're going to do is just apply our mascara as we normally would do. So if you're going to be applying lashes, don't build your mascara up as much as what you would do if you're just going to wear your natural lash. So for today's eyelashes, I'm going to be showing you one of my new recent fave styles, which is number 33. The reason why I love these eyelashes is they're one of our faux mink range, so the hairs on the end blend out to literally nothing. They're so gorgeous. You can see on the camera the way they blend out, and they've got like a nice soft curl on them, and they do graduate a little bit longer towards the outer side. Now I'm going to be trimming these down quite short today. I want to more focus on just the outer corner of my eyes to stand out. So I'm going to take 2 to 3 little segments of the lash off, and then stick them on with my favourite glue, which is duo glue. So I'm just going to give my lash a little bend, as I always do. This will just soften the band and help the lash to be able to stick and not lift. I always find this just makes the lashes last a lot longer, and they look a lot more softer when they're on as well. So you can kind of give the lash a little bit of a pull just so that it softens the band. So we're going to take the lash and we're going to apply it over the top. And when you're applying your lashes, just make sure that they sit where the black liquid liner is, or into the groove where your hair grows out of your lash line. I'm just going to wait for them to dry. So now that our lashes are on, the makeup look can look a little bit top heavy. I quite like my makeup personally looking like everything is on top, but just to balance it out, what we're going to do is 2 things. We're going to put a little bit of a soft light brown and blend it underneath, and then just finish it off with a little bit of mascara. So I'm going to take Peachy 07 brush, and we're going to use the same shade from the palette before, Dirty Tan, and we're just going to apply this really softly under the lash. I don't want too much underneath at all when I'm doing this. I want it nice and natural. And then I'm going to take my mascara and just place a small amount just on the bottom lashes. So at this stage, this is where you can change your preferences to what suits your face shape and what you like. So you could add a liquid, a pencil liner underneath. You could add black underneath the eyes. But with this look today, I just personally prefer to keep it nice and fresh. So if anyone does choose to put a little bit of colour on the inside of their lash line, my favourite brush to actually use is PC41. So I'll just wait for it to show you a close up, which is like that. So the reason why I love using this is because the brush is so flat. It's just a really easy way to be able to paint along the lash line. So I'm going to use the Huda Beauty Overachiever Concealer in Marshmallow. I've been liking just using like a nice cream colour just to brighten up the inside of the eyes. And if anyone is new to doing this, it's just a way to basically make the eyes look that little bit more bigger. And what you're going to do is pull the lash line down and then really softly paint the colour in. and you can see how it just opens up the underneath of the eye, and you only need a tiny little bit of this. So next what we're going to do is we're going to pop a quick base on, and we're going to show you which gold shades of pigments can be used in different areas on the face. So to begin with, I'm going to apply our Goddess Illuminator all over the skin. This is something that I always do now when I'm doing any of my looks. So if you haven't seen any of our other YouTube videos where we're talking about what the Goddess Primer does, it basically just acts as a skin softener on the base. It'll hydrate your skin, and it just gives you like a nice glow. If you wanted to as well, seeing as we're talking about gold pigments today, I'm going to take a tiny little bit of our Wow pigment. We're going to mix it into the Goddess. So we're just going to change the shade of the Illuminator from a pale gold to a dark gold. So if anyone's at home thinking they would rather have a darker gold Illuminator, your pigments can be mixed into any product. That's why they're raw pigments. So you can see it'll go nice with my tan. And to do this, I've just used our PC19 brush. Oh, I love that. So at this stage, your skin should feel nice and hydrated, nice and glowy. But what we want to do now is we want to create a little bit more coverage on the base. So I'm going to mix my two favourite foundations, which is the NARS Sheer Glow and the Bobbi Brown Skin Foundation. I use shade Santa Fe in the NARS and 6.5 in the Bobbi Brown, and I just mix the shades of foundation to whatever's going to go with my tan that day. Oh, hi Simba! How are you? So using the same PC19 brush that we've just put our primer on with, I'm just going to start drawing onto the base anywhere that I feel like I need more coverage before we disperse it out. So the main parts where I'm going to apply my foundation are to my forehead, the centre of the cheeks, and then let it glide right the way around. So remember, when you're using your PC19 brush, you can glide the brush for a lighter effect, or you can pat the brush to build the coverage. And today I'm going to go right over the top of my lips with the foundation, and then we're going to blend it down into the neck. And then normally what I like doing is taking more of a flatter brush when I'm working around the outside of the hairline. So you can see the way you've got that little section of the foundation. We're just going to actually glide that out with a PC01 brush. And the reason why I love using this is just so that you can go close to the hairline without it getting into my blonde hair and painting the hair orange. So next I'm just going to pop a little bit of concealer on. This is just to highlight certain parts of the face. So I'm going to go underneath the eye. We're just going to focus on this area just for now. So I'm actually going to use PC27 brush today. This is designed as a blusher brush, but what we're going to do is we're going to blend this product out over the top of the cheekbones to create an airbrushed effect underneath the eyes. So normally what I do is I blend the outer part on each side, and then I will go back at the end and wipe away the edge. So the concealer that I've chose to use today is the NYX Can't Stop Won't Stop concealer in shade Vanilla. You want to get it so that the closer that you get into the lash, there's less product on the brush, and that way it won't mix in with your shadow. And then with the leftovers of the brush, I just tend to go over the top of my lips just to lighten there. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take our cream contour and we're going to start adding a little bit more depth into the cheekbones. So we're going to use a PC18 I think we'll use to do this. So we're going to take the cream contour with our PC18 brush. We're going to pat it into the pan and then twirl it around the lid. This is just going to create an evenly dispersed product onto the brush before we apply it. So you can see the bronzer looks really dark when you first see it. When you actually apply it, you're going to blend it right the way out. So don't worry about seeing this line to begin with. You want to create your contour and then you're going to blend it out. You can just keep building it up until you're happy with it. So I'm going under the jawline, under the cheekbones, and then I like using a bigger brush when I'm using it on the forehead, so I'm going to go back with me. I'll use a smaller one than normal. I normally use PC04, but we're going to use PC15 today. So we're just going to blend that in. Just gives a bit more of a defined look. And then when we're working around the tops of the forehead, you're just going to put a tiny little bit on at a time, leaving the centre of the forehead a little bit paler. You can just continue to keep building this in for as much as you want. So before I get into start using the pigments on the base, I'm just going to set the foundation. So I'm going to use our setting powder with our PC05 brush, and this is my favourite brush to apply to the centre of the forehead. So just make sure you apply it slightly above your eyebrows, but you just want to pat that product in just to get rid of any excess oil on the skin. This will help your makeup stay on all day for you as well. And then I'd normally do just around this area as well. But depending on where you're oily, you could apply this product. Then using a PC24 brush, I'm going to use the MAC Deep Dark Bronzer today. And I'm just going to set the cream contour really, really lightly. So I'm using the bigger brush than what I'd normally use. Just because I want it to look nice and soft over the top. We're just going to dust that. But to be honest, I'm not using a lot at all. Just really lightly. So when you're working with the pigments on your actual base, there's a few different brushes that I use that are my favourites. So number 27 is one of my faves. It's something that I would use as a blusher brush, but not only as a blusher. We tend to do like a highlighter and then something that's kind of in between a highlighter and a blush. So sometimes we'll smile, and rather than placing the pigment there or your blusher there, you can actually apply the pigment almost in between, so it just sits not as bright as a highlighter and not as strong as a blusher, but just somewhere in between. So 27 brush is amazing to do this. Sometimes I like to dust Wow Pigment or Pale Pigment if I'm a little bit paler all over my skin, and PC03 is an amazing brush to be able to do that, so I'll show you a little bit later on in the tutorial. The other two brushes that I love to use to apply pigments to the base are highlighter brushes. So we've got PC17 and PC28. So you can see the difference in the sizes. PC28 is just a little bit bigger and not as long as the PC17 brush. PC17 is our best-selling highlighter brush, and it's described as a wand because you can get a really bright, harsh look with the brush. So I feel like I can't do a tutorial without showing you how I'd actually bronze all over my face with Wow Pigment. It's something that if anyone likes being tanned or you like looking like you've got holiday skin, this is an amazing way to get your skin to look like it's glowing. But that being in mind, we do need to be really conscious and careful about where this applies, because we're basically going to make ourselves look as shiny as this. So this is our Wow Pigment, and I'm taking PC24 brush. So the idea behind this is we want to make our skin look like we've got almost like a goddess glow over the top of the foundation. So the part of the skin where I'd apply this is slightly over the top of the forehead. Just be careful, I've got scars obviously on my forehead, so I do need to kind of slightly work around them, but the amount of product on the brush is literally hardly anything. Most of it's on my hand at the moment, but we're just going to dust slightly over the top. And I can't really do a tutorial without showing you how I put Wow Pigment on my chest. So something that since the day we bought Wow Pigment out, and I've always been obsessed with shimmer and being tanned, Wow Pigment is something that I've always loved to just dust really lightly over the body. There is a particular knack to getting this really good though, and it not looking too Tin Man and fake. So you do need a really big bronzer brush. PC48 is actually a really good brush, but today I've got me PC24. Just going to lift your straps away and just start dusting the product. You have to make sure the product is blended into the brush before you apply it, otherwise you will end up with like lines and stripes, which you won't be able to blend away. But this is a really good tip for any prom girls that may have like streaky fake tan that's gone wrong, or we get it every year with prom season where the prom girls come in and they'll have been sunburnt. So this is the best product to kind of blend away any uneven skin pigmentation. So you can see the difference between the shoulders, how it just gives like a nice golden glow. I am obsessed with looking like an Oscar, so I'm just going to have a few minutes just getting myself goldened up. So this one is called Wow Pigment. If you've got a darker skin tone than me, Hustle looks amazing on a darker skin, and if you're paler, Halo Pigment mixed in with a tiny little bit of Wow will also create the effect on a much paler skin tone. So I'm all bronzed up and I am loving life. Let me just get my necklace back. So now that we've got all the shimmer on the bod, which I am feeling like a goddess, I'm just going to show you the different gold shades that I would wear on the face. So the first colour that I love wearing is Gold Fever. So anyone who's got a tanned complexion, who likes a rose gold colour, Gold Fever is the most amazing. It's like a highlighter colour, but it'll also sit on the cheeks, and if anyone likes this effect but feels like it might be a bit too dark for them, in a paler version, Crush would be the shade to go for. So we're going to pick a little bit of the Gold Fever pigment up, and we're going to press this into the skin, so I'll just show you what it looks like. So can you see the way it's got like a little bit of a pinky effect, but it's also quite goldy? We're going to make sure it's packed right into the brush. And before I apply this, I'm going to apply a little bit of setting spray just to my face, because I want my skin to look nice and soft, golden and luminous once this goes on. So if you can just keep your skin a little bit more moist once this goes on, it's just going to sit a little bit better. So bear in mind, if you are going to be wearing a setting spray, put it on from quite a distance. You want it quite far away. So I'm just going to let it drop either side of the base. And what will happen is the particles of the setting spray will kind of fall down onto the cheekbones and look nice and natural. So I'm taking me Gold Fever pigment, and what I'm going to do is smile into the camera and apply it just over the top of the apples of the cheeks. So it's not as bright as what a normal highlighter would look, and we're applying it slightly lower. So it just gives like a nice soft golden glow. And the other parts I would wear this is just above the lip, just to make that pop, and you could even put a little bit down the nose as well. So if you're looking for a highlighter, that would be gold. Normally what we tend to do in Peaches is we would match up the colour on your brow bone and tear duct to the shade on your highlighter. So the colour that we're going to use is Most Wanted, which is our gorgeous soft gold highlighter. It doesn't have any shimmer in, so this is why we're going to wear this as the highlighter. Sorry, it doesn't have any glitter in it, so this is why we're going to choose this one as the highlighter. So we're going to take I can't decide whether to do PC03 brush or PC17, because I don't want it to look too bright, and PC03 is going to soften it, so that's what we're going to go for. So I'm going to twirl it round in the hand like we always would do, and then we're just going to really lightly dust it over the top of just the centre of the cheekbone. So for the base, we've got Wow Pigment dusted all over, including on the chest. We've got Gold Fever on like the blusher part, and then we've also got Most Wanted, which I am loving on my cheekbones, and you can take that up a little bit higher as well. So next for our lips, I'm just going to put a classic look on today. I love wearing like a pink gloss. So what I'm going to do is just keep a neutral lip liner with my normal peachy pinky gloss. So I'm going to choose one of the shades out of the Hold the Line lip liner collection. I think when I'm wearing my pink shades, I always like wearing Feline. But for some reason today, I don't know why, I'm more torn towards wearing Borderline. I can't decide. So these are the different shades that come in it. So I think, what should I do? I'm always choosing. We'll go with Borderline. It's nice and soft, and it's just going to look natural on the lips. So anyone who's looking for a nice natural colour to wear on the lips, Borderline is great to use. So I was undecided today on what colour I wanted to use, because I always say I wear a baby pink, that's me, but I wanted to keep it more on the goldy side. So I've picked out 3 of the colours. Let me know in the comments what you would have chose to go with this look. I want to get a gauge for what all the YouTube fam would have chose. So I've got Bambi, which is my classic caramel nude shade, which doesn't have any pink in it at all. That's what I was thinking would be nice to keep it classic to go with this. Then I started thinking maybe a little bit paler and maybe a tiny bit of a pinky undertone. So I picked Cherub Up, which is this tone. So it looks like that nice pinky peachy tone. And then my all-time favourite is Ladybird. It's like a soft strawberry milkshake shade, baby pink. And even though I love wearing all nudes and browns and things like that, sometimes I just can't not wear a pink on my lips. So let me know in the comments what one you would wear, Bambi, Cherub or Ladybird. And today I am going to choose, I don't know which one. I think I'll go Cherub. I think I'll go with Cherub, and then if I'm feeling like I'm not pink enough, I'll put a dot of Ladybird in the middle. I am trying to steer away from baby pink, but it's just me all over. So we're going to apply Cherub lip gloss. Oh yeah, it's pale enough definitely for me. And what we're going to do is apply the lip gloss, rub them in, and then I'm going to put a little bit more lip liner on, I think, to blend them in. Let's just get a little bit of a lip brush. Sometimes I just love putting my gloss on with a brush. So this is PC40 brush. No, I am loving that colour. I don't know whether I prefer today's look where I actually draw back over the top of my lip liner, so it's more like I'm looking like pale. Sometimes I don't like having a massive lip liner look. Yeah, I'm loving that. So the lip gloss that I've chose to wear today ended up being shade Cherub. So this comes in our NE5 lip gloss set, and it's one of the 90s collection that we brought out last year. Yeah, I don't think I need any more pink in the centre, so we'll keep that as it is. So I hope that you've enjoyed learning all about our gold different pigments that we've got. I am feeling like a golden goddess right now, covered in wow pigment. I will make sure that I link all of the products that I've used below to help it be a little bit easier when you're going on the Peachy's website to buy any bits that you need for yourself. Always feel free to write in the comments below if there's anything that you want. And Millie, I hope that we've answered your question from last week on how to wear Dynamite on the eyes, because that's the main colour that we've got on today. So I will see everyone next week. If you haven't already, can you all make sure that you've liked and subscribed on the page, like us on Instagram and Facebook, and I will see you all on Thursday for our live little party. See you everyone, me and the Pigments, bye!